Hi folks, we're at GenreCon in Guelph. I'm here with one of my favorite actors, to be quite honest, and if you've watched the show, you know how big a fan I am of the Biehn machine, Michael Biehn. Right off the bat, I want to talk about a movie that you don't really get a lot of credit for. It's a movie made by Michael Biehn back before Transformers called The Rock, where you play Commander Anderson. Now, I always felt like you were the conscience of that movie. That movie, for me, worked so well because the villain in it, played by Ed Harris, who you had worked with before in The Abyss, is the villain with a conscience. But to me, that whole movie hinges on your amazing scene, the "I will not give that order" scene. And for me, that's the scene that really carries through the entire movie. What are your memories about working on The Rock?
I had a lot of fun doing it, a lot of fun working with Michael Biehn. You know, anytime that you start a movie and you've got a really good script and you've got a really good director, you know, you always feel really good. And Michael Biehn brought all these actors up to San Francisco, showed them around The Rock, and then got us all together, and we basically kind of worked on our characters and basically made it better. And Michael Biehn was very open about letting us change things to make the characters work better. I feel with that movie that Nicolas Cage, I think it's Nicolas Cage's best performance, you know. He's restrained, but he's right at that level where, you know, he's believably kind of frantic, you know, and funny. And I mean, that's a big movie to carry. And I think I thought Nicolas Cage, who I think it just, you know, I mean, he'd already won his Academy Award and everything. I think he's the heart and soul of that movie.
What'd you think? I want to ask you about Alien 3, because we just recently talked about Alien 3 on the show. And Alien 3, within the first 30 seconds, we're told that Hicks is dead. How'd you feel when you heard about that? Did they approach you about being in the movie at all?
Fuck Alien 3.
Would you be interested in coming back to the Alien franchise if they just decided to treat Alien 3 as a really bad dream?
Of course.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Hicks in hyperspace for whatever it is, 57 years. You suit up again and grab the pulse rifle?
I suit up for a lot less, yeah.
How about your old buddy James Cameron? Any contact with him? Any plans on working with him in the future?
Well, I made a little grindhouse movie called The Victim, and you know, I basically showed that to Jim. I don't know. I think it was about 6 months ago now, and went out to his compound, and we hung out for the day, and we talked a lot about the character in Avatar that Steve played, and you know, once he cast Sigourney, he kind of felt, well, maybe there's too much of an Aliens connection, which I understand. From what I understand, Sigourney's going to be in the next one also. So I don't, you know, Jim, I don't think is going to be doing anything other than that sequel. So I don't see myself working with him again on that movie. And we're all getting a little older, so I would love the chance to work with him. Not so I can be in a movie that's going to be some hit, or, you know, that is going to, but when you work with people like Jim Cameron or Michael Biehn or Billy Friedkin or Robert Rodriguez or Quentin Tarantino, but it's like watching a true professional you know, do their work, you know, and it's really exciting to be around somebody like Jim or somebody like Billy Friedkin or Quentin, you know, and just watch them work. I mean, it's fun. I mean, it's just fun to watch, you know.
That's something I really like to see when actors who work with a lot of really distinguished directors eventually direct themselves. You know, one guy who comes to mind is Harrison Ford, who flat out says, I don't want to direct, it's too much work. So I'm really glad to see that you're starting to get into directing, and I wanted to ask you, who are your biggest influences on your directing style? Like, are you taking anything from some of the people you've worked with?
Well, you have to understand that when I did The Victim, I basically somebody came to me and said, oh, I have some money, and that happens a lot, and usually they don't have money. So I said, okay, I'll rewrite an old script that needs a lot of work, and go ahead and write me a check, and and I didn't really expect him to, because I get a lot of people who tell me they have money and they don't, and so he did, and once his check cleared, I was like, oh my God, I got to write this. So I took this script that was called The Victim, that was more of a Saw-like movie, and I didn't want to make that type of movie, and I rewrote it. It was like a page one rewrite, and I rewrote it in 3 weeks. And during that 3-week period of time, we did our pre-production. So we did our pre-production without a script, which is not usually the way that you want to do it. So we cast it, and we dealt with the Screen Actors Guild. We did all our locations, and we did, the paperwork, and just a lot of work during that 3 weeks. And then at night I would write, and then we rolled into a 12-day shoot. And 12 days is like, it took 11 weeks to shoot the Terminator. So we did 12 days. And so it was just like a fun little, basically I start that movie out with a graphic that says not based on true events, So it's kind of there's a lot of winks and nods to different directors. I've got one in for Jim. I've got one in for Stanley Kubrick, Long Drive Up the Hill that reminded me of a movie that he did, and David Fincher, who cut me out of Aliens 3. I kind of decided to use some of his brilliant work in the credits of my movie, and I quote Quentin Tarantino's movies. I quote Clint Eastwood movies, and so it's kind of a kitschy kind of. It's a thriller. It's fun. It holds up, but it's a little over the top, a little bit fun, and a little bit meant to be kind of like. A little bit meant to be different, and I think we made a movie that was really kind of different than what you normally see out there. It's not, I call it a grindhouse movie only because it was low budget, exploitation. I didn't have enough money to do real exploitation, which is like zombies or special effects or whatever, so I just got my wife to get naked for me, and her friend to get naked for me, and that was the sex, and I threw in some dirty cops and drugs and a little bit of violence, a little bit of torture, and then I threw in a serial killer too, It was like anything that I could think of that, and it turned out cute. It's fun. It's a little movie that's Anchor Bay picked up, and I'm real proud of it. I'm not, I'm proud of the fact that we shot it in 3 weeks, and then I wrote it in 3 weeks, and we shot it in 12 days. But it's a little movie. It's a fun little movie. It's got a lot of flaws, but it's kind of fun.
Would you be interested in directing again?
I would, but not under those conditions, I would like to, usually you have a script when you do pre-productions, and the most important thing about any movie is a script. If you've got a great story, and then you go out and you cast great actors, you don't really have to do very much more. And so if I could find a story I could tell, and it would attract a lot of good actors, I would do it. Tombstone is a perfect example of a script that was so good that the actors just took it upon themselves to make a good movie out of it, because George Cosmatos, who ended up directing it, was more a visual sort of director, and I don't think he knew the beginning from the end of the story, I don't think he had any idea which character was which, but he just wanted to make sure that the picture looked good.
Now there was some gossip, behind the scenes talk about some discrepancy over who actually directed Tombstone. Some people think that Kurt Russell directed most.
Kurt didn't direct it. No. Kurt was very instrumental, from my understanding, that to keep that movie together, because the kid who wrote it got fired, and he was going to direct it, and he got fired after 4 weeks, and we only had like an 11-week shoot or 12-week shoot or something. And so the script was 135 pages, and he and Jim Jacks, who I give most of the credit to, had to go into a room and start tearing out scenes. So a lot of actors lost a lot of the scenes that they'd signed up to do. And we ended up with a 90-minute movie. So, but he didn't direct it. But without him, I don't think the movie would have ever gotten made.
Have a lot of people walked up to you at this convention telling you that they're your Huckleberry?
That happens to me a lot. What I like about these shows is it gives me a chance to have a screening room, and for the last year I've been screening The Victim in these screening rooms, and if you're in Tucson or if you're in Atlanta or someplace like that, you get these local critics that come out to see it because they want to see it for the first time, and that's how we sold the movie. So I like to show the movie at these things, and I probably won't come to as many as I did last year because I was trying to sell the movie. But what I do like about interacting with the fans here is that, like the last kid that came up to my table was 21, 22, and he told me that Hicks was his favorite character, and that he thought that Aliens was the best movie ever made.
Well, it is.
And he wasn't born when we made the movie.
Yeah.
And I get the same with the Terminator, and I get the same with that Johnny Ringo's the best bad guy, it's my favorite bad guy of all time, and I get that from children that, are, like I said, they weren't around when we made the movie. So it's nice to know that I've been in a couple of movies that have kind of crossed these generations, and people from, 18 and 19 to, 88 and 90 are still appreciating the movies.
Yeah. There's another movie that doesn't really get as much appreciation as I think it should. We started off talking about The Rock, your role in that one. I want to talk about The Abyss, which I thought you just killed it in as Lieutenant Hiram Coffey. One of the most intense performances I've ever seen. I always come back to that scene where you're cutting on your own arm in that movie, and you just got those shakes. How do you get yourself into a role? That's probably one of your most crazy, intense roles.
Some characters are just good characters, and that's a guy who, under normal situation is, a good soldier. And basically what happened to him, and I have a lot of sympathy for Coffey, because he was, number one, he's just a soldier and he's used to taking orders, so he's cut off from his chain of command, and then he realizes that he has this underwater sickness, I forget what they called it in the movie, and wasn't maybe going to be able to make rational decisions, and then he's got people coming to him telling him that there are aliens in the water, and fighting him about the fact that these are aliens, which sounds to me absurd. I mean, it's absurd. The whole idea is absurd, and plus he's a little off anyway because he's sick. And I said, well, prove it, and they show me a picture of a little piece of white and a little squib in the water, and it doesn't look like anything to me, and to me I was doing what I thought was right to save the world, and he was a very easy character to justify, because aliens, come on, I mean, who believes in aliens, and it's only because of the way the movie was shot and everything that and the fact that there were aliens that he wasn't a heroic character, and I think his death scene, probably along with the one that I did in Tombstone, is probably, and I've done a lot of death scenes, one of my favorites.
Want to take it back to Terminator. Would you be willing to return to the Terminator franchise if they decide to do something set in the future, like a Papa Reese type of character, or an alternate timeline where Reese never dies, like he does in the original movie? Would you be interested in returning to that character?
If they paid me enough money, of course.
All right, well, I want to thank you a lot for your time here. It's been awesome talking to you. You're one of my all-time favorites, and I hope you have fun at the rest of GenreCon.
All right, man. Thank you very much.